We've got Pete Yanity on the phone with us. So, Mr. Yanity, thanks for being with us again, voice of the Clemson Tigers. And just talk a little bit about the 10-2 year the Tigers had in the last game, obviously with the loss versus South Carolina.
Yeah, I think you got to look at this season as one in which, some amazing numbers occurred. There were, the three really elite games, and, the Georgia game was one to start it out, and the team looked great there. Got off to a bad start against Florida State, that unraveled. And then I'll tell you, I really thought going into the fourth quarter of the South Carolina game, the story on that was going to be how this team, took some punches early, if you will, got over some early mistakes and was able to, come back and win that thing late on the road. And then again, turnovers tell the big story. Dabo Swinney says it best: when his team turns it over, it doesn't win. And if you look at kind of the track record during this run of three straight seasons of 10 wins or more, you look at the fact, the plus minus, when it's been good for this team, chances are there's a W sitting there. When it hasn't, then usually it goes the other way. So it's the kind of team that, it's an intriguing ball club. It's probably the last team in the world Ohio State wants to face in a bowl game, because it's the kind of team that can score in bunches. It's shown it can score about, against just about any defense. So I think you can look at the season as a success. Obviously, losing to the arch rival is never a good thing, and this has been an uncustomary run against South Carolina. Give South Carolina a lot of credit for that. But, for the most part, I think a lot of the expectations of this season certainly were delivered.
Right, and once again, we're talking to Pete Yanity, voice of the Clemson Tigers here on WSBF-FM. Talk a little bit about, Sammy and Sammy Watkins obviously probably going pro, and maybe Vic Beasley, and comment a little bit on Taj. And, he did lose to South Carolina, but overall I think he's done a lot of great things for Clemson, and hopefully he can go out on a high note here with a win in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, it really would be a fitting final game for him to not only go out with a win, but to tie Rodney Williams for the winningest starting quarterback in Clemson football history, and, be the guy who leads the program to 11 wins in 2 consecutive seasons. Taj is the kind of guy that I think, lived up to the expectations of his career. He came in as a very highly regarded quarterback, albeit coming off some major knee issues, but I think he did everything you could have asked. And, Chad Morris was telling me that, Taj is the kind of guy that when he first took over the starting job, there were some issues just handling shotgun snaps for him. But he eventually evolved, and he grew with the program. At times did he try to overextend himself and try to force some passes in there? Sure, but for the most part, you look at his career, very good completion percentage, very good QB rating, and, for the number of throws that he made, his interception rate really wasn't all that bad. He just had a couple of bad, bumps in the road along the way this year, but I don't think he has anything to apologize for. I do think Sammy's probably obviously looking at the NFL to jump early, and, why wouldn't he? You can't blame him. Nuke Hopkins kind of showed the light, if you will, for him, but the fact that Nuke was taken the first round last year when a lot of folks weren't sure if that was going to happen. Vic Beasley, I think, is another story. I think there's a guy, if he comes back for one more that final season of college, he really could continue to develop. You saw him develop technique this year. You saw him develop, the ability to actually move off of blockers better than he did the year before. And I think another year in college really could shoot him up into a potential, top 6 to top 10 slot the following year.
Right, and talk a little bit about this Orange Bowl matchup with Ohio State. I think that obviously the only other time Clemson's played Ohio State was in the '78 Gator Bowl. If you got to go to the Danny Ford, the interview he had this week with all the media, just elaborate on that, and how was that for you?
It's funny because I covered Danny for several years that he was the head coach, and it was kind of surreal on Wednesday when they invited him over to chat with the media, because I was like in a time warp. It was just like listening to him talking about, that week's game against Maryland, back in the late 80s. But, what an interesting night, because it was a big deal game for him anyway, that Gator Bowl in '78, because first game, he's 30 years old, first game as the head coach. And then to, have to go against a legend, and then to upset that team, and then to have that incident happen where Woody Hayes punches Charlie Ballman. So, Danny very respectfully basically said, that's the last thing in the world he wanted to have that game remembered as, the Woody Hayes game. He wanted it to be remembered as, a game which, Clemson rose up and beat a favored team and a really good Ohio State team that year. And to this day, he almost sounds like he did right after that game, in which he was like, this needs to be about us getting a win, and we don't want to, exploit anything further off of that. In terms of this matchup with this Ohio State team, Braxton Miller, there's a guy who you would think, assuming he's back at Ohio State next year, will be front and center in the Heisman conversation, and he should be. Very dynamic guy, very quick out of the backfield, similar to Taj in many ways in terms of their numbers and their skill sets, although I think in the case of Miller, it's one of those situations where perhaps he's a little bit of a different kind of runner than Taj Boyd is coming out of the offensive backfield. And in terms of arm strength, I really don't know if you could say that Miller, is the same kind of thrower. I think Taj maybe has a little stronger arm. And again, I'm judging this based on having watched on TV and having also, watched a lot of videos so far of Ohio State since the matchup was announced. But, they got another guy coming out of their backfield. They got a running back named Hyde, who's a big, physical-looking kind of back, kind of prototypical Big Ten running back, you know what I mean? So that's going to be a real challenge. Ohio State right up there in the top 10 in every offensive category in the country, and they've had trouble stopping some folks at times this year. So, we may be there a little while on the night of January 3rd.
That's right, and hopefully we'll be hearing a few more oranges in the end zone than we did versus South Carolina. But talk about, obviously they match up. I think they match up better with Ohio State than they would have Alabama, because I think Ohio State was exposed a little bit last week. They probably weren't a national title team. I know they have won 24 straight games, but it'll be interesting to see how the Tigers respond, especially coming off the last Orange Bowl versus West Virginia.
Yeah, and, I look at it when you're at this time of the year, you can say, well, is this opponent a better matchup? I mean, you know what? Alabama would have been a tough matchup. Ohio State's a tough matchup. Michigan State would have been a tough matchup. South Carolina's getting ready to play Wisconsin. There's going to be some aspects of that matchup that are difficult for both of those teams. I mean, I just think this time of the year you're dealing with pretty good quality. And, the bottom line is, again, who knows how that game turns out in Columbia if you don't, turn it over 6 times. And, again, give South Carolina all the credit in the world. They had a goose egg in their turnover column. That tells you how efficient they were with the ball that night. And South Carolina had something to do with maybe 2 or 3 of those turnovers. But, in terms of matchups, I mean, they're all tough. I think Braxton Miller's ability to get out of the backfield and look at, the success Connor Shaw had for about, for the first quarter or so and then the final quarter and a half of the game against Clemson, that's obviously a concern for this defense. Jameis Winston really didn't scramble as much for Florida State against Clemson as I thought he would, but I think a mobile quarterback is always a scary thing for any defense. So Brent Venables has a few weeks to get ready for it, just like the Ohio State staff has a few weeks to get ready for Clemson's offense. And I'll be anxious to see just what scheme they come up with to try to contain Miller, but he looks like the kind of guy that's tough to contain.
Yeah, and just talk about the direction of the program. Obviously 2 BCS Bowls in 3 years. It worked out well with Florida State being in the national title, Clemson, the Orange Bowl. I think you had a record 11 ACC teams in bowl games. Just talk about, the rise of the ACC and with Louisville coming in next year.
Yeah, the ACC is still a league that some teams have some work to do. But I will say this. In terms of the Clemson program, and Danny Ford acknowledged this week when he talked, and he made a great point. I thought the same thing now for a couple of years, is that, Dabo Swinney, let's face it, he has made Clemson football cool again. You know what I mean? He's kind of given it that national brand again, that national swagger. It certainly had it in the late 70s, early 80s under Ford when they won the national title, and then again after the years in which the being on probation hurt them in the early and mid 80s, losing the scholarships. Late 80s, this was a team that was winning 10 every year. And, many people believe if Ford had come back for 1990, that's a team that might have made a run at a national title because it would have been cohesive and maybe they don't stub the toe early on in the season that year against Virginia. But that having been said, Dabo's brought this brand back, and he's done a real nice job, and he gives credit also, of course, to the staff. But the guys they brought in are some talented guys. I would think, again, Florida State ain't going away. It looks like Florida State's back to what they were a decade ago. The ACC, though, will only be as strong as Miami's ascension is. You know, for this league to kind of get into the conversation with an SEC, a Big 12, a Pac-12, and to a certain extent the Big 10, it's going to need Miami to be strong. It's going to need North Carolina, and I think they will under Larry Fedora to get strong. I mean, you got to have 4 or 5 teams that really are a tough out every night, either inside of the conference or outside of the conference. And, you know, a good example, the thing about the SEC is it's a quality league, obviously. They've shown that. You've got Alabama at the top, Auburn, you know, bounced back up to the top. You know, Florida was down this year, Tennessee's been down, but game in and game out in that league, you're getting a pretty rugged test. And that's the thing. So when a South Carolina goes out of the league to play out of Central Florida or to play a rival in Clemson, you know, they've seen a very similar caliber. You know, Clemson's a really good team. Well, they've seen a bunch of really good teams week after week after week. This Clemson team, again, you never want to shake a stick at 10 wins. That's a great achievement. And they saw some really quality opponents this year. I think it's fair to say, though, week in and week out, maybe they didn't see the same level of opponent. And in the other leagues, maybe you see that. You know, in a Pac-12, Oregon, you know, runs into a Stanford and some other tough teams week in and week out, maybe more so than some other leagues in the country, you can say that.
Right. Once again, we're talking to Pete Yanity-Voice of the Clemson Tigers, and look forward to going to the Orange Bowl again. You know, obviously worked out well with Clemson getting in there, but, you know, if you can go down there and, you know, win versus a name brand like Ohio State, I think that'd be a huge win and a huge step in, you know, the bringing back of the Clemson football like in the 1980s.
Well, yeah, let's face it. I mean, you get a win against Ohio State, you got back-to-back bowl wins over top 10 BCS teams, and no other team could say that. And, you know, again, even in a 12-game schedule, it's still a big deal to win 10. To be able to say you won 11, you know, 2 years in a row, that's pretty doggone impressive. Despite, you know, some of the bumps in the road against Florida State and South Carolina, it's still an impressive thing. And, you know, it's always a great thing to win that last one of the year because you go into the off-season feeling momentum. You can, you know, you go out and finish up recruiting in January by saying, you know, look at our program. We're right there. We're, you know, to that high prospect. Come to our place, fill in the piece right here that we need, and, you know, you'll help us win 12 next year or 13.
That's right. And, well, we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and look forward to seeing you maybe down there in South Beach. Hopefully it'll be a little warmer, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll get you on again next year, but we appreciate it, and go Tigers.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And, you know, I'll tell you, it's interesting. A couple of years ago, I remember being down there, and I remember, like, the night before the game in South Beach, they actually had this function that myself and the West Virginia play-by-play guy showed up to, and I'm thinking, okay, it'll be a nice, warm Florida night. It was like 40 degrees.
And that's a cold 42 because, you know, Florida 40 is a...
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I'm thinking to myself, wow. So hopefully, if nothing else, we can get a little bit better.
Wear some shorts and golf shirt. That's right. That's what, you know, as cold as it's been here. Come on.
Yeah, let's act like we're in Miami, whereas when I go down there for basketball games, I kind of want it to be cold, and, of course, it's warm. And, you know, you kind of want to have cold weather outside when you go to a gym for a basketball game. But anyway, should be a lot of fun, and, yeah, you hope this thing ends up on the right net.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot of Tiger fans will make their way down there. I think they made some, you know, things available with cheaper tickets, and hopefully a lot of people will show up down there and have a good crowd.
Yeah, the athletic department's done some really creative things. They want folks to come and buy tickets through the school website or call the 800 Clemson number and, you know, do it that way. But I think it's the fact that it's just a better situation.
Right.
Being on a Friday night, you can go down there, make it part of a weekend. It's still time to get back for the kids to go back to school on Monday. I think it's going to be a packed house. It's going to be it's going to have a big-time feel to it.
Ohio State will bring you got to think they're going to bring a lot of fans down to Miami. You know, they travel really well, so hopefully the Tigers can too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be a good turnout for both. And I think it's just going to have a really great atmosphere. Even, you know, better. The atmosphere 2 years ago was good, but again, you felt like not everybody could make it down there because it was in the middle of the week and kids had already gone back to school. This one, I think, will really have a festive kind of bowl feeling all the way around like you want to.
All right. Well, thanks again, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll listen to you and be saying Orange in the End Zone live when the Tigers get a win on January 3rd. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. You have a Merry Christmas.
All right, you too. Same to you. That's Pete Yanity, voice of the Clemson Tigers.